My guests on this episode of the Refinery Podcast are Seth and Jacob Buckley, the father-son team that makes up Fire Pit Ranch. If you want to leave a legacy with your life and with your children, you need to listen to this episode. If you care about helping your neighbors in crisis, you need to listen to this episode. If you care about the nature of our world and the need for male role models for young men, you need to listen to this episode. And if you want to watch me cry, you need to listen to this episode. Let's get into it. All right, Mr. Seth, good to see you. How you doing,
brother?
Man?
Good to be with you, man.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming in. Jacob, glad you're here.
Happy to be here.
This isn't our first time recording together, is it?
That's right.
We did some good stuff with following up Paul Martinelli's Think and Grow Rich last year.
That was golden.
Maybe we'll do something like that again.
I look forward to it.
Man, I know you guys are very busy, and when people hear your stories and what you got going on, they'll understand why I feel so privileged that you're here with me in the studio today. And, I reached out just with the wing and a prayer saying, man, I'd love to get both of you guys in here. And I really appreciate that you took time in your schedule to do that. It means a lot to me, and I'm looking forward to the conversation. I have to show you, I got my domino.
Saw it.
Goes with me in my truck. So, yeah, so that's from your event last year. You did a really cool sort of object lesson with dominoes and how much your influence can go. And that's related to Fire Pit Ranch. I was at a Fire Pit Ranch dinner and annual event, right?
That's right.
So anyway, I got my domino.
There you awesome, go, man. Love it.
I saw that in the truck the other day. I go, I got to bring that in when these guys come. So I'll set it over here. But,
awesome.
Well, of course, I've benefited a lot from the company of both of you in different ways. We had a really killer fireside chat out at the house one day, and I knew when we had that conversation that it would not be the last, Lord willing.
Absolutely.
And it was a good one. And, all conversations are not created equally. And sometimes you connect with people and it just is meaningful from the get-go. And that's the way I felt about our conversation. And I was really unaware of some of the things that you're into and doing and what you've done. And I'm probably still quite unaware. So what I would love to do, I want to hear both of your stories and different parts of it, but I'd like to start with you. Talk about like your journey, because I know you've been in like ministry and been involved in churches and different things and been in different pastor roles, but share about that, because we're going to talk about Fire Pit Ranch and kind of what led to that and then where that's gone and where it's going. But I want to hear some backstory from you if you don't mind.
Absolutely. First of all, thank you so much, Rick. Just a ton of respect and admiration for you and what you do.
Thank you.
And just the role that you have in the lives of so many people. The influence, when you think about influence, I was blessed to be raised in a home where my mom and dad loved me and nurtured me and my siblings. I have a brother and two sisters. Another sister that's with the Lord. And we were raised in a home where my dad was a minister, so I was exposed to ministry very early. And probably at the age of 6, my dad had a major back surgery that he was on his back for 11 and a half months and had to learn to walk all over again.
Wow.
And it was during that time, he had just finished his PhD at Florida State, was teaching at Furman University, and he was obviously a leave of absence from there during this time. But as a family, it kind of galvanized us as to what was most important in life.
Sure.
Because our celebrations and our wins became very simple. And it was, hey, Dad stood up today. Hey, Dad took 4 steps today. And so I think part of the journey from there, as we grew up, we learned to celebrate those things that were simple, and not be enamored by the flash of the world. And so that was a little bit later. Mom and Dad purchased some property in Easley, and we were raised out on a farm, and we raised cattle. And My brother and I did a lot of that work, milking cows and things like that, which was really cool. But growing up in an environment where I also watched my mom and dad pour into the lives of young people.
Yeah.
They would bring youth groups out to the farm all the time. And
you had that modeled for you.
Yeah, so I was seeing it at a very early age, like, hey, this is cool, because they were just passing it along to the next generation, giving it back. And so as I got older, and I made a faith decision at an early age, but when I was in high school, it's when I really kind of sealed the deal on what I want to do with my life as far as influencing others from a faith perspective. I was leading Bible study for my football team, and that was really kind of my first real leadership, and seeing that God had opened a door for me to speak to guys, that I resonated with guys really well. And so then, going on into college and was planning to go into computers, which was kind of the rave back in the 80s, I'm going to study computers. Basically, my dad said, you need to study computers. This is the thing. And after my first computer class, I was like, that's not my thing, And so then I went into business management and marketing, which is what I graduated Furman with. Yeah. And but while I was doing that, I was working in a church, serving as a youth pastor part-time, and my heart just kept gravitating towards, I loved working with young people. This was powerful. But my degree's in business management, marketing, is how does this work? My girlfriend at the time, as we got engaged, and as we were talking and just our lives, she grew up on a farm as well. We went to high school together, and she loved her family. Very simple, very similar beliefs as far as very simple and doesn't need a whole lot. Loved life, loved family, loved the Lord. And so as we began to talk about future and what future looked like, even before we were married, she made the comment. She says, I know what would be a dream for me is if one day we were able to have like a working farm, or a ranch or something where we could help orphaned or abandoned children. Right. Yeah. Nice. Or kids that didn't have a dad or mom, and that
was kind of a seed right there.
It was a seed. Yeah, absolutely. And so we began to, think through that, pray through that as the years went in. I got my master's at New Orleans Seminary, and went on to in youth pastoring down in Greenville, then down in Somerville. And while I was doing that, chaplaining football teams, I had the privilege of being the football chaplain for Coach John McKissick, who is the head football coach for Somerville High School. Okay, yeah. Just a sidebar note, one of the coolest, most special memories is 2 weeks before he passed away, his grandson asked me to come down to meet with him. And this was, 2 years ago? 3 years ago, maybe. Actually, 4 years. It was right in the midst of COVID. And was able to lead him to the Lord. Nice. He was always very principle-centered man. Yeah. But those chaplaincy roles in the football teams at Dorman High School, which is where I still help out today, has been an important part of my life outside of the church. And then in the church, I've had the role of youth pastor and associate pastoral roles, doing a lot of preaching but mostly families and student ministry. Okay. Men's ministry development, things like that.
So, but let me ask. Yeah. So, but there's obviously a ministry theme going on here, but there's also, I kept hearing the word football. Now, was that your sport? Did you?
Yeah, I was fairly successful in high school doing that. And I went to University of Alabama out of high school to my first year, and I was a small fish in a big pond. Yeah, and transferred to Furman from Alabama.
Are you still a fan?
Alabama?
Yeah.
Roll Tide.
Okay, just making sure.
No, absolutely. We're big Roll Tide fans. Right. I was there. It was Coach Bryant's last year. When I was there. Yeah. Yeah. So. And I think that's been kind of a cool little not escape, but another niche of impact that God continues to allow me to have with football teams. I mean, I've spoken to a lot of college football teams and high school teams, and then predominantly Dorman, but I still speak to a lot of other schools in that regard.
Yeah. And that has included teams that you've been on, because you might not know this, but the gym that I go to, or at least I will be going back to in January, There's a guy, Sean, that is a trainer there, and I guess he was at North Greenville with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and but he mentioned you, and he talked about your influence on him. So
that's funny. Yeah,
and that's
cool,
because
man.
you guys were teammates, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway,
that was North Greenville when
that's
they were
kind
in
of
the
cool.
playoffs. Yeah, that was a playoff year. Yeah, with Chadwell's year.
That's awesome.
Chadwell, who's now up at Liberty University, by the way.
Yeah.
Great guy. So yeah, but we were being in youth pastoring, and then leadership development has always been a big thing for me.
Yeah.
And I've always consumed any kind of books or seminars on how to be a better leader and influencing other people, because my dad is the greatest man I've ever known, and he saw things in me that I didn't see in myself, and he would be quite honest, my dad was connected with a lot, even though he was in ministry. He served in a local church, but he also taught at the university level. But he was very connected with a lot of business leaders throughout the community and the state, and he wanted to expose me to that.
Nice.
So he would carry me to luncheons and meetings, and let me introduce you to my son. This is Seth, and so
Nice.
he brought me to the table. And so I was listening to some of the brightest minds in business leadership. I remember sitting on the top floor of the Commerce Club over in Greenville, and sitting down with a guy that, big CEO, and I'm like, what in the world am I doing here? I'm with my dad.
Nice.
My dad wanted me to hear how great leaders think. And
it's a massive influence. Isn't it?
it is huge.
Yeah.
It's huge because it's when you expose your kids to people, when they see you admiring and in the presence of some of these people, then they begin to lean in to like, so what is it about this person?
Yeah,
so
and
important?
it says a lot about your dad. He was clearly a person of growth. Like he was out. If he was out there doing that, I mean, he wasn't settled with where he was. He was continuing to grow and
he went and he studied and got his insurance license. He studied and got his real estate license. He was certified in so many things just because he wanted to learn.
Yeah,
he wanted to be conversational on every topic possible. If you look at his shelf, he was the most well-read man I've ever known.
Nice.
Petroleum industry. He had his brother is a leader in the petroleum industry down in South Mississippi, and so Daddy was conversational on every topic because he consumed. I can't remember the name of the journal, but anyway, and I saw that, and so I wanted to be a perpetual learner as well.
Nice. Well, I like that your dad wasn't just a learner. There's that, be a river, not a reservoir. He wasn't just like gathering knowledge, right?
Yeah.
He was letting it come through him. And the other thing, when I heard you talk about your dad saw something in you that you didn't see in yourself, it reminded me of my favorite definition of leadership. A leader is somebody who brings out the best in other people.
That's good.
Right. That was Ray Pugh, old camp director guy. I heard that from him, and I like it. Latched onto that. But anyway, I think that probably describes your dad pretty well as a huge influence on people.
Huge influence, and when Robin and I we had blessed with 4 boys, Jacob, my oldest son, and that journey of raising boys and also being in ministry, obviously putting some of these things I learned to the test.
Yeah,
and raising kids. I guess we reached. It really was when we came to Spartanburg, and the boys started getting up in age. I started to build these fires, and one of the beautiful things about a fire, when you build a fire, I mean, most everybody loves them, but especially guys, there's just something we're just drawn to about a fire. And so I never had any problem. The TV could be on. Yeah. I just say, hey guys, I'm going to start a fire.
Everybody's out there.
They'd all come out there to the fire. And we start the fire. Well, when you start a fire's not quick. Mm-hmm. So you sit there, and it would not be uncommon for an hour to turn into 2 hours, and the conversation could be so superficial at first. Mm-hmm. And then before you know it, we're hitting on some issues that ordinarily would have been uncomfortable. Yes. But it's just open. Oof, and there's no judgment there. Yeah. Yeah. And then it earned the right for me to be able to speak into their life, because they're like, Daddy, what do you think? I'm like, well, you may want to. And so as this grew, I mean, me and the boys are still so super tight now. Mm-hmm. We talk every day. I talk to the boys every day. There's not a day that goes by that we don't talk. But that's really where the fire pit theme, the ranch idea was years earlier, but the fire pit theme was something that kind of began to grow. And I mean, I remember a close buddy of mine that was in ministry, very effective in ministry, and had a huge followership. But he called me. He says, "Man, I'm losing my son. He's 14 years old." And he said, "Man, what do I do?" Mm-hmm. I said, "Do you have a fire pit?" He said, "What?" He said, "I got a grill." I said, No. I said, "Go down to Lowe's and get a fire pit." Yeah. He said, "For what?" I said, "Just trust me. Go down, get a fire pit, put it in your backyard, get 2 chairs. Mm-hmm. Don't say anything to your son. Get it all set up. And say, hey, I'm coming out here. Can you help me get this fire started? Don't have anything planned. And then just let me know how it goes." And so, I don't know, 2-3 weeks later, I get this picture. I still get it on my phone. It's him and his son in the backyard at the end of the 3.5 hours. He said, "The best night of my life."
Nice.
And it was only because of, when you value people and you're around the fire pit and you're not rushed for time, conversations emerge that you never thought were possible. And so Jacob experienced that growing up. And so as we grew and he goes to college and they're trying to figure out what they want to do with their lives and whatnot, that began to be a drumbeat. Yeah. Just those memories, those thoughts of there's boys who don't have this opportunity.
Sure.
And so that's kind of.
Well, and men too, right?
Mm-hmm. Men have the hardest time of taking the mask off until you give them permission.
Yeah.
And that's, I guess, if there's one thing that God has gifted me in, is being able to sit down with somebody, and I know when they're playing the game, and it's just discerning that they want to be judged on what it appears to be. Yeah. They don't want to be judged on the real them because they feel like it's a failure.
Let me ask you, do you think that is maybe as much or more of a problem kind of inside of like Christendom and in kind of church culture? 100%. Or is that
100%?
I think it's that's been my experience, that it's easy because, you get these phrases and things you're familiar with and you kind of throw these blocks out there and kind of some Christianese blocks on it. I'm not trying to bash on Christianity or, being a Christian. I'm just saying that it seems like that you could hide too, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, listen, 100%. Yeah. I think in my opinion, there's more honesty down at the pub. Yeah. For some people than there is inside the church.
Yeah. Well, I think
because they're just like, I don't want you to think that I don't want you to see the junk that I'm dealing with. I want you to feel like that I've got everything all together. Yeah. And I want to say, dude, none of us have it all together. No. And it's okay that you don't. Let's walk through that together as to what that looks like and what your next steps need to be.
Well, and especially, I think if we have kids, they need that. And boys probably especially, although, I have boys, so I'm partial to boys. I haven't experienced having a girl, but you think about, I remember one time I was at this funeral of this guy, and the guy that passed away was kind of pillar of the community type guy, and the family was all a big part of the community. But he was, probably 85 or whatever. And the son, I would say at that time, was around 45 or 50. And I just remember saying something to him afterwards, the condolences. And he said, "Hey, thanks for that. You lose a little confidence when your dad passes, And I thought, man, that's pretty profound, because we don't realize how much we need that good modeling, good influence, or what the impact of a father is having, right? And I think a part of that is the ability or the freedom to struggle, right? And just kind of figure a life out.
There's a book by John Eldredge called Wild at Heart.
Oh, yeah.
He talks about the father wound. Yeah. And a lot of guys walk around with the father wound, but they don't know it's the father wound. Yeah. Yeah. But so there's these actions that are happening in their life, and they don't really know why. It's there, but there's a wound that they can't heal in any way. And without another community of men that call out and speak into them hope and greatness, and like, man, I see this in you, they're going to walk around with that wound the rest of their life. And John Trent and Gary Smalley wrote a book years ago called The Gift of the Blessing. Yeah. Talks about the 5 elements of blessing. And one of those is the spoken word and the power of words.
Spoken word as in like Bible or just the words that you speak?
Like I'm speaking over, like I speak over my sons. You know, we had so one of the things we did with our boys, all 4 of the boys, I think this would be pretty special to hear. Mm-hmm. We had like a welcome to manhood night. And so, I don't know if I've ever shared this publicly, have I? Probably never have. So like on Jacob's night, I had invited, he had no idea. I had 15 men that had been influential in Jacob's life. And we met down at one of my best friend's cabin. And so when Jacob arrived, did I drive you there? How did we get you there? Do you remember how you got there that night?
You drove me. I think Mom drove me and dropped me off.
Yeah. So he walks down, and so there's this cabin there, and he when he walks in the room, there's all these men that were like very influential in his life, like blew his mind. And I had catered in this unbelievable meal. Mm-hmm. I mean, just this 5-star meal, and we ate, had the fire going, and then for almost 3 hours, I had each man come up and give a token, a gift, something to bless Jacob and speak into him what they've seen, what they see in him. Uh-huh. And then I was the last one, and I gave him a sword, and called him out in this room and said, you know, men, this is my son. He is a man, and you know, so it was kind of a blessing that I wanted to publicly bless him at these guys, and doing that with each one of my boys.
Where is that sword today?
At my house.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Do you look at it every day?
I don't look at it every day because I got 3 little ones running around the house.
Yeah, they're not ready for the sword.
They're not ready.
Look at their own sword.
Oh, they're ready for it, but Daddy's not ready for it.
Yeah.
It's in my closet next to some other tokens that are very special to me.
So I mean, this is almost like, I suppose, the opposite of intervention. They show up and everybody's there. What was that like when you stepped into that room and saw all those guys there?
Well, when we pulled up, I recognized some of the cars.
Yeah.
I had no idea what was getting ready to happen.
Yeah.
But when I walked in and everybody was standing in a line around the room, I knew it was something for me.
Yeah.
And immediately, I mean, nervous, anxious, didn't know what was going on, but overwhelmed at the men who were in that room. It was, these were men that I looked up to my entire life. I consider giants in many ways. And, I mean, from my discipleship group leader to, I mean, a handful of probably some of the most successful businessmen in the upstate, and who carved out an entire afternoon to be a part of an event that had to do with me. And that was very humbling.
How did you guys hold it together? Like I'd
we were blowing snot.
I'd have been from the moment. It'd have been the whole time.
Yeah. You know what was cool, Rick, was when that night was over, men in tears told me that it was the most impactful night of their life, or one of the most, and thanking us to be part of that because of the blessing they received.
Well,
and
talk about healing the father wound.
I think for a lot of them, indirectly.
Yeah.
And that was not even my intention at all. My intention was to bless him.
Well, isn't that
these
interesting?
Guys
right.
Well, they were a lot of them. They were able to give something they never received.
Nice.
That's a good word. Yeah.
We could stop right there.
Yeah, that's
we can stop right there, but we're not going to. But oh my gosh, you had a choice. Like, you didn't have to do that. Like, you decided to do that. Right, that you said the word intention, right? You had an intention and you acted on it. And I wonder how many people sit on good ideas, you know, like they're like, ooh, they hear something like this and go, ooh, that'd be cool, man. I wish I could do that. You look around and every one of us, like you said, the spoken word. Well, look, as long as we have breath and we can speak the English language, we got the spoken word, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, every single day we have an opportunity to provide at least some. Well, look, I don't mind people knowing that before we started this, you said, let's pray. I wouldn't have held it together, not for a moment. But you said, let's pray. And what you said was, you talked about light. And I think about like, you know, and that's what I want people to get to is that, look, it's so easy to curse the darkness, right? And it's easy to see or, you know, but every day we have a chance to do something like that for people, right? Shine a light. And we never know. Like, you had no idea what it would mean. And I bet it would be interesting to have those guys around and have them kind of give their perspective and then the sort of residual. It's just like the dad, you said, go light a fire and set up 2 chairs, right?
Yeah.
And that one, I mean, think about all the nights that went by. And he's pining over his son and going, I'm losing him, and probably thinking, the world's too dark. It's a lost cause. It's not, this is it. Like, you know, but at least he called you, you know, at least he called you and followed through. He didn't have to follow through and light that fire, did he? No. So anyway.
You made a comment. I want to jump off that. You know, we deal with a lot of boys that have been called idiots and morons and losers. And, you know, when we call them up their 5th grade year for the first meeting, you know, we say, you know, hey, you've been selected as the 12 most influential leaders in your school with the potential to influence your school for good. Yeah. And these 12 boys they're troublemakers. Yeah. I'm saying they're looking around like, what are you talking about? You know, who are you speaking to? And that's when we say, you know, people see greatness in you, and we're coming alongside of you to help you see it. Nice. And you can just kind of see them kind of like straighten up a little bit, and because anybody can speak negative words, and unfortunately, there's a lot of people walking around today with wounded hearts because of spoken words. Yeah. And you know, so the power of the word goes both ways. It can be positive, it can be negative. Mm-hmm. And I think as parents, as leaders, as influencers, we need to be very careful about the words we say, because people, they carry more weight than we realize. Yeah.
Well, and I think it's a good reminder for all of us just that we never underestimate your influence. 100%. You know, right. I said my favorite quote about leadership is that someone who brings out the best in others, but, you know, the one we're all most familiar with is leadership is influence, right? Mm-hmm. Nothing more, nothing less. So every human being has the power to influence, and we are influencing. It's not whether we're doing it by default or by design, right? And so I appreciate the intentionality that you guys have put into that. So I don't want to get too far away because I want to hear the rest. You got a lot more of your story to tell, but so pick it up from there, wherever you need to go from there.
No, man, I think just a lot of what was going on at the time of as we're walking through their teen years, and then Jacob goes on to college, and while he's studying outdoor leadership there, we continue to do ministry, and while he's playing football there at North Greenville, I do some chaplaincy type stuff, doing some videos, talking with the team, and so we were able to really have some good moments there at North Greenville together. And it was really interesting that it wasn't like we were trying to, hey, look at us as a father-son
Sure,
team.
Right.
We enjoyed being together. Yeah. I mean, I don't know how many times Jacob and I talk to each other every day. Mm-hmm. Of course, we work together. Yeah. But we've always been that way. Sure. We've always made, like I said earlier, me and the boys talk because we enjoy each other's presence. Yeah. And I value, it's interesting. A lot of times, I really value his insight. He's very wise. He's one of the most well-read guys that I know. And
completely agree. Yeah.
Well beyond his years. And so, but, when he was getting out of college, well, it's his senior year. You wrote the thesis on
senior year, but there's something I think is important to mention that you could speak into more than I can, because I was on the receiving end more so. But there was no names will be mentioned, but my senior year, I was having a really big conflict with a coach on the team.
This is high school.
This is in college in North Greenville. Okay. Having a really big conflict with a coach on the team that had lasted for a while. And finally, I just brought Dad into the mix because it was evident that he had something against me.
Mm-hmm.
And because I had not seen him act that way towards any other players. And once Dad got brought into the mix, there's another gentleman who was a chaplain for the team, Brian Spearman, who we're really close with. After talking with this coach, it was evident that, this coach grew up without a dad.
Mm.
And the coach saw how close me and Dad were,
mm-hmm.
and how we did everything together. And what Brian was able to pinpoint was that there was a little bit of jealousy is the right word.
It wasn't a little bit. It was a lot. You're being.
Yeah.
And so that's when my eyes were open. Like, I always knew that, youth and children hurt that grew up in the home without a dad, but that was my first time really seeing a man hurt.
Yeah.
From not having the influence of, a dad.
Yeah, sure.
And that's where I think the light bulb clicked for me. Like, man, Fire Pit Ranch is not just for kids.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to have to figure out a way to reach the men too.
Sure.
Well, and if you don't address those wounds earlier,
mm-hmm.
then
that's what you get.
They're gonna get more. They're gonna expand influence more of your life and the decisions you make, how you treat people, how you see the world. And so, a lot of what we do. Like today, in our mentorship with our boys this morning, we're talking about generosity, the importance of a leader being generous. It's not just about finances. It's about your life.
It's a way of living, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because there's either two types of people, givers and takers. Mm-hmm. And the givers are the ones that have the greatest opportunity to influence the world. Mm. You give of your time, give of your resources, giver of joy.
Yeah.
Giver of kindness. And so how do we help young men who struggle with so much baggage realize that there's so many more things greater than the wounds in their life? How do they deal with this? Mm-hmm. And then don't let that have say of your life anymore. And now expose them to a future that's extremely bright and hopeful. Because a lot of them don't know that there's life beyond this.
Yeah, they've never seen it, right?
Never seen it. Mm. And so, I would say that going through that journey, that was a hard journey. Just a cool sidebar in the midst of all that pain. It happened to be his senior year, which was really hard, that he was going through that. But he ended up starting a Bible study with the team there, and on the last day of practice, 9 players?
7 received Christ.
7 players prayed to receive Christ.
Total of 9, maybe.
And baptized 9 players.
You baptized them?
Mm-hmm. He was right there with me, but I baptized him there at North Greenville, and it was the whole team was right there. And it was really one of the things, I think for him, it was like, even though he went through so much pain that year because it was hard, that God said, life's so much more than football, man.
Yeah.
I got bigger plans.
Yeah.
And one of those guys went on to play in the league. Freddie Martino, one of the guys baptized. He went on to play for Falcons, I guess, or who it was. Can't remember now, but
Tampa Bay. Not sure.
But so, and it was during that same year that he wrote the paper on Fire Pit Ranch and what it would be. And I remember us brainstorming together. He would call me and he said, "Can you read over my paper or whatever, and I'm reading through this." And I'm like, one day this could really happen.
So was this for a business class, or what was the?
So my last semester at North Greenville, I went on a semester long course called Immersion.
Okay.
With outdoor leadership, and I don't know how many nights I ended up spending out away from school. I mean, I would say collectively probably close to 100, different trips and stuff. And so while I was out there, it was almost every single night we would build a fire, and that's either what we were cooking over, boiling water, whatever. But there was a lot of interesting conversations that we had around the fire. And as I had more and more of those, it just became more concrete that Fire Pit Ranch is going to be the name. Mm-hmm. I mean, you could talk just about any issue, and no matter who's sitting around the fire, it's almost like there's a level playing field.
Yeah.
And as I would come back from each trip, I would update him, about what we were doing, and I was sharing the idea of Fire Pit Ranch with the people in the class, and a lot of affirmation that was happening. And by the time the semester ended, it was almost like, and I'll share a little bit more about it later, but in some ways, once the semester ended, that's when the idea came to a halt too. Mm-hmm. And there was a pause period there.
Yeah.
And here in a few minutes, I'll share a little bit more about that. But sure. I think that's when we finally decided, if we move forward with this idea, this is what it's going to look like.
Nice. Yeah, I look forward to that. So just kind of finish up with.
Yeah, so for me, I would say that in the transition of me being with Fire Pit really happened after Fire Pit began, because 2015, he was getting over double knee surgery thanks to football. Mm-hmm. And in that recovery time, he was asked by the director of R.D. Anderson, hey, will you come and do a long-term sub? Mm-hmm. And I'll never forget it. This particular day is etched in my memory forever. He comes home from school, and the first words out of his mouth were, Dad, we've got to do something. Mm. He's just shaking his head. I'm like, what? He said, if you could just hear the conversations I heard today. And he just began to unpack what he heard. Mm-hmm. And I mean, he was visibly, emotionally stirred to the core.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like, hey, let's, it wasn't that. He was like, we've got to make this happen.
Yeah, you weren't talking about a camping trip here. You were talking about a whole.
How do we help life transformation? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so, that began a journey of just thinking through and, praying through, and he's having more conversations. And so then he says, I think I got an idea that I need your help on. I said, man, you name it, whatever you need. He said, I think I'm going to put out an ask for these guys, and we're going to go bust up a beaver dam. Now, I've been doing youth ministry for a long time, okay? And I teach seminars on youth ministry. I teach conferences on this stuff. And I'm sitting there thinking, that is not going to bring kids in. Mm-hmm. That's just going through my mind. I didn't say it to him. I was just like, we need to come up with a better idea than this. Come on. I said, you feel good about that? He said, oh, yeah, these guys, they'll come. I said, all right, tell me what you need me to do. He said, well, you and Coach Sebeski cook. Come cook. I said, we'll do whatever, fish fry, burgers, whatever. So I'm sitting there thinking, oh, Lord, I pray this works.
Yeah, dozens of kids hitting each other with sticks.
Yeah. And so, he had some feedback, but not I don't want to say overwhelming feedback, but he had some of the guys like, hey, that's great. So we show up down there, 13 boys show up. Hmm. And I'm sitting there with my mouth hanging open. And when you hear the stories of these boys, they were so hungry for an adult. They just wanted to be with them.
Yeah.
And listen to them.
And especially being outside.
And outside. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And they busted up beaver dams, got mud, slop all over them.
Yes.
And we were cooking and doing the deal. And then Jacob just, we got around the fire, and he led them just in a time of just conversation. And wasn't real heavy.
Yeah.
Wasn't real spiritually heavy, not like that. It was just about building relationships. You got to earn the right to be heard.
Yeah, right.
Because I would say some of the boys were pretty closed off to the gospel. Don't you think? I mean, they were, not that they were closed off, but they were just like.
They weren't raised in church. None of the boys, they didn't have any kind of background.
Yeah. So they were, anyway, so that began a journey of like, my word, there's a ton more that are hungry for this. Because I think when you got back to school on Monday.
Oh, I had a bunch of kids asking, like, where was my invitation?
Yeah,
they missed out. They missed out, yeah.
And so, and I obviously want to go back to kind of pick up on that with him.
Yeah.
But for me, I'm still at First Baptist Spartanburg during that time, and we're going through, and Fire Pit's growing, and then the mentorship to the elementary age starts in 2019, 2018, somewhere in there.
The year before, 2 years before COVID.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
and I was helping with some of the curriculum development there, writing that, and so it was during COVID that God just began to stir our hearts a little bit more intentionally about, okay, this thing's blowing up, and it's going to be it's a real need. And for my wife and I, we saw, just a real desire to be more intentional on, especially reaching young men, because they're going to be leaders in their homes and that kind of stuff. And I had seen that overwhelmingly in student ministry, the growing number of boys who didn't know what it means to be a man. And I felt in some ways limited as to what I could address on an ongoing basis in the church. Mainly because you're just limited there. And if I could be more intentional about being laser focused on that group, and God opened that door up for us in 2021. And so December 2021, I went full time with Fire Pit to work. I tell everybody, Jacob is the director, so I work for him, but I'm always dad. Yeah. So.
Yeah, you don't give up that role. All right, so take us back to the day in the school. You're there, and that day you came home. What happened that day?
When I got there, first off, I had zero desire to be a teacher and had no idea what I was going to do as a sub. I literally just had surgery on both knees, and so I was in a rolly chair with crutches. So I'm in the hallway. This is first period. Kids are coming in, and I hear there's two boys that walk in front of me, and I hear one of them say that he had just spent the night in the cab of his truck in the Walmart parking lot. And, when I heard that, I didn't know what to think, and I just began to pray that it would be an opportunity for me to meet the kid and see if I could help him in any way, at least get a better idea of his situation. And so after first period gets through, second period gets ready to start, and the kid comes into the classroom. And as I'm reading through the roll, I figure out who he is. His name was Zach. And after I hand out the assignments for the class, I bring Zach into the little office there, and these rooms at R.D. Anderson are massive. And so there's a lot of space there. And so I bring him over, and I said, man, I couldn't help but overhear your conversation earlier when you were walking down the hallway. Is there anything I can do for you? Do you need anything? And he said, no, it's just something that happens, pretty regularly. My dad was beating my mom. I jumped on my dad. We began to fight, and he kicked me out of the house. And sometimes I'll spend the night in my truck. Sometimes I'll go to a friend's house or my girlfriend's house or whatever. But it was the way he said it that made me so uncomfortable. It was almost, I could tell it was just, it was nothing new for him. It's my first time hearing it.
Yeah.
But for him, it's just, another battle with dad.
Yeah.
Just something that
daily life at his house.
Right. And I think that is what made me so uncomfortable. Yeah. It's not that he was shook up and, was seeking out help. It was like, no, this is.
And he had kind of resigned himself to this is the way life is.
This is it. Yeah. This is all I know.
And he was surviving.
Yeah. And so get through the day, I didn't tell anybody, went home, told him the story. And I said, I don't know what Fire Pit Ranch looks like. I know we've talked about it a bunch, but just in my 8 hours there, I know there's a group of kids that at least I can reach. Yeah. And and I knew then it's a group of kids that they were not going to church. These kids were going through a tough stage, and they needed a man. And again, I didn't know what that looked like. But that was day one. Yeah.
And it wasn't so much that they struggled with authority. They struggled if you really did care.
Yeah.
I think, is that a fair way to put it? They didn't know if.
Say a little bit more about that.
Well,
what does that mean?
I think what won the right for Jacob was his genuine concern for them as a person. One of the things, I was listening to the philosophy of teaching that comes out of North Greenville University. And their teachers that come out of there have been listen, I'm a Furman graduate, but I heard this from an administrator that one of the things they love out of all the institutions that are sending in teachers, North Greenville teaches first. You have to reach the heart of a child before you can teach the mind of a child. And when they know that you care, and they'll lean in to listen to what you have to share with them. And
May I?
Yeah.
Look, I mean, I think we talked about this when you and I were, part of my background, you're outdoor leadership. My degree was outdoor rec. And, part of what that led me to do was spend 8 years doing wilderness therapy with emotionally troubled boys. And just kind of responding to what you said, like the heart of a child, we're talking about hundreds of boys in 8 years that went through, and most of them had bombed out in formal education, and they were brilliant. Mm-hmm. They were brilliant.
Yeah.
And it's what led me to study experiential learning, but also it's just the concept that and what we experience so many times, and this isn't about me, but I just was when they could really identify all the stuff that was going on in their heart and start putting the right words on that. And then all of a sudden, man, their mind was like sharp and everything else. So I don't want to go too far down, but I just want to say that you're speaking to my heart. I know what this looks like for someone who has so much massive potential inside of them, but they're in an environment that's not really drawing that out of them, right? And giving them the messages that basically says you failed, right? You're failing.
Harvard School of Education did a study. I think it was 2020, not 2020, 2000, 2002, somewhere in there, on 7 kinds of smart. Okay, and the school systems teach and evaluate on 2 of those.
Yeah.
And so you have kids going through the school system that excel in the other 5.
Yeah.
Some are in the experiential learning world. And when they can't show you what they can do here, and they're being told that they're stupid here, by the time they get to high school, these guys feel like losers. And so some of the boys have just whatever.
Yeah.
And so he was dealing with that early.
Yeah.
In the school. And their families. The family scenarios were not positive either.
So let me I want to go back a little bit to what you said. They struggle when they feel like you care. Is that a trust thing? Is that idea of it's something different, and they've been probably not allowed to have any hope in anything genuine?
Well, I think in some ways they want to okay, so what's your angle?
Yeah.
You're showing me that you care, but what's the catch?
There's some kind of manipulation going on.
They're used to manipulation.
And
so that's what it was with Zach. That's what it was with Zach in the beginning. He had never, aside from maybe going to see a counselor out of school, he had never really had anybody else ask him questions that I guess made him feel a little uncomfortable.
Yeah.
In terms of, are you okay? Are you good?
Yeah.
And so I think that's what you mean by, do you really care?
Yeah. Well, like I said, all conversations are not created equally, right? And if you're used to one level of conversation and you hear a different one, it's a little bit tough to take on board, isn't it?
And these kids can read you like a book within seconds. They know if you're real or not. Yeah.
That's how they survive, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So that day kind of, threw another ember on the fire pit, I had a big flame or whatever, kerosene, whatever you want to call it. But it really got things going again. Yeah. And then, so if I don't want to miss anything important, but from that day to the time where you had mentoring and officially had a mentoring group, how long of time frame was that?
You're talking from the mentorship program beginning about 4 years.
Okay.
About 4 years. I had a group of boys important piece of the story that I need to fill in.
Sure.
So I was a long-term sub for 8 weeks.
Yeah.
There was a teacher on maternity leave that I stepped in for. So I already talked to you about day 1. While I was there for 8 weeks, the assignments that they gave me to give to the kids, they were finishing in 15 to 20 minutes. And so there was 30 to 40 minutes left over, and I didn't really like the idea of these kids staying on the computer the whole time and just having dead space. And so I started taking everything that I had learned my degree, outdoor leadership, team building activities, all kind of stuff. And I started doing a new team building activity every single day with these classes. I had 4 classes.
Yeah.
So,
and people might not understand like how much preparation it takes to do something simple.
It's And so, but I didn't like seeing the kids hooked on the computer the whole time. And so I did one activity one day, and the kids responded incredibly to it.
Yeah.
So I decided to do it every day. So fast forward to the end, at the end of my time there, when it was my last day, I told Miss Yarborough, just thank you for giving me an opportunity. I had a blast. And that was basically it. And I gave her a proposal for a leadership development program that I think the kids would benefit from. If R.D. Anderson offered anything like this, I think the kids would love it. Well, it was, thank you so much, yada, yada. That was it. Well, she brings me back in almost immediately after, a couple days after I left, and she said, Jacob, we need to talk a little bit more about what you did here for those 8 weeks, because I just had to expel a kid, the day after you left, once the teacher came back, because he didn't want to do anything for the teacher. He wanted Mr. Buckley.
Yep.
You talking about, getting cold feet, feeling like I just messed up. Yeah. What did I do? I thought I was about to get in trouble. And she said, whatever you did, we need to incorporate it here. And so I walked them through everything that I did, and she began the process of, trying to build a program that they could open up the following school year. Well, that was in, end of March. I get a call in July, and basically saying, Jacob, I just wanted to let you know that the ropes course you presented to us, materials are being delivered today.
Nice.
We're having a team install it. They're coming out, I think, from North Carolina. They're building the ropes course. We're also starting the leadership program this coming school year, all these things. And I'm just like, man, this is going to be incredible. These kids are going to love it. They're going to be adding a ton of value. And she's the only problem is we don't have a teacher. And I said, okay, go find one.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Yeah, go find one, because it was not on my radar at all, man. And then she asked me, would you be interested? And in the pit of my stomach, I'm like, no, I do not want to teach. But I think back to all the kids that I was able to have a positive impact on, and the impact they had on me. And I said yes. And during that 8-week period, it's when I was taking the kids to do busting up beaver dams, cookouts, 4-wheeler rides, all kind of stuff. Because as I was standing in the hallway, I would all of a sudden find myself surrounded by 8, 10, 12, 15 boys, 15 to 17 years old, talking about, hunting, fishing, 4-wheelers, trucks, just whatever I would have a conversation with them about.
Yeah.
And they would not leave until that bell rang.
Yeah.
And I felt such a connection there that when she asked me if I'd come back and teach, it was at first, no.
Yeah.
And then I started thinking about all those faces and names. Yep. Like, I'll do it.
Nice.
And so started the next year, literally, a few weeks later, I moved in my office, my room there, and about 3 to 4 weeks in, after starting the school year there, I had such a different approach to teaching than I think probably anybody. And honestly, what I did was I mirrored my professor, Trey Fouché.
Yeah.
Trey, if you listen to this, shout out to you, man. Love you. But I mirrored his teaching style. And Trey was a phenomenal facilitator, but Trey would rather watch you figure it out on your own. He'd give you just enough to paint the picture, but he would want you to figure it out on your own. And that was my approach to teaching. Yeah. And so while I was teaching, the boys that I would have in my classes, they put in my leadership class, man, I just immediately connected with. Yeah. And I narrowed down, a few of them that just had it really rough at home. And so every Tuesday morning I would buy them breakfast at Waffle House. And that year, when we started, we filed the paperwork for Fire Pit Ranch. And so while we're waiting for all that to come in, I meet with these boys every Tuesday morning at Waffle House talking about life. And as soon as we get the final notice that the 501c3 was cleared, then that's when we really, the floodgates open, you know, for these kids. And we started doing all kind of events. And man, it just continued to grow and grow and grow.
And those events were like, a lot of them they were all outdoors. Every one of
them.
Nothing
was in different places.
Different places. And the big thing was, you know, we did 42 events our first year with these guys. Almost every week we did something new. And we started off with 3. That was our first event. We had as many as, you know, probably 30 at our probably largest, you know, and we always try to keep it somewhat intimate. We didn't want a large group because that can kind of get away from you. But we started what we called the Beast Feast. And we, you know, about every other week, we would go to the same place. We had Dad was talking about the men's event for me, the affirmation event for me. That's where we hosted the first few years of our Beast Feast. And we would just have all kinds of food, steak, chicken, sausage, burgers. I mean, whatever you could think of that could be thrown on a grill or smoker. That's what we had. And all we would do, we would literally have grills and smokers set up, cooking with a big table and chopping block next to a fire pit. And for 90 minutes we would cook, throw the meat on the chopping block, cut it up. The boys would eat it. And after all the food was gone, we'd go around the fire and we'd share testimonies and talk about life.
Nice.
We'd always have maybe one guy that we had kind of, one man, you know, prepped to.
There would always be other men there.
Other men would be there, and but then Jacob would facilitate the.
But the mentorship thing, the question you're asking about, Rick, you know, when did that come about? About 3 years into the Beast Feast, when we realized a lot of these kids were kind of already on that path. And while we had a lot of great memories, and a few of those kids, you know, chose to turn their life around, most of them were just like already trucking down that road. We decided that we needed to make an effort to reach same type of boys at a younger age.
Well, and that really happened after a meeting that really kind of emerged when we were kind of debriefing and it was good. All the Beast Feast moments were good, and we loved them. And you sat down with it
was Chris Harvey and a few other, but
excuse me.
I didn't want to get too far ahead, but I was at a seminar while I was at R.D. Anderson. I wanted to learn about gangs. And because I was seeing a lot of sign that I didn't like in the school, and I just didn't know what to look for. But there was a lot of activity that was happening in the Spartanburg area, and I went to a seminar, and they had a breakout room with the officer there. I can't remember his name. Did an incredible job, but he was basically just informing you on what to look for with gang activity, gang signs. And it was in that room where he said the average age for a kid who joins a gang in Spartanburg County is 11 years old. That's 5th grade. And so I took that back with me, shared it with Dad and our board of directors. Chris Harvey, who had spearheaded the mentorship program our first year, really helping us get it off the ground. He was the captain of the Roebuck Fire Department. And we were just like, guys, this is 5th grade. 11-year-old, 5th grade. This is where we got to start. And that was 2018-2019 school year, our first group we started with. And then 2019 is when it really began to, threw gasoline on the fire, and it really started to grow.
So how long was it during that time when you said gas on the fire? Like, were people starting to approach you to ask you to start things? And talk about that a little bit.
So when word fire pit, the word had really been getting out about what we were doing with youth before the mentorship program started. And when we started at the first school, Chris Harvey did an incredible job at Roebuck. We, in that circle, because that's such a tight community, word got out pretty fast about what we were doing, some of the results that people were seeing. And so we began at first getting contacted by friends, that was in the church, that they might be teachers or administrators at other schools. Hey, love for you guys to come in, do a presentation, tell us a little bit about what you have to offer, because I think this could be a good fit for our school. Our second year is when we really gasoline on the fire in terms of like, okay, we were a little overwhelmed by the response. Yeah. Because what we didn't go in at first with was, any kind of structure. We just knew like, okay, we needed to have men go in, pair up with these boys in need, but we didn't have any kind of cap or limit to how many boys we'd take. Didn't really have a cap or limit to how many men would go into the schools. And so the second year we were at this school, they gave us a list of 46 boys on the list that they feel like could benefit from this program. That's when we first really got to the point of like, okay, this could get overwhelming very quick. If we don't have any kind of guideline structure in place, then there's no way we're going to be able to manage this. And so we were able to kind of dwindle that number down to 24 or 21. I can't remember the 21. And that was still too much, but it was just like the counselors were like, we can't narrow it down any more than this. So that year was kind of like a holy smokes, we got to figure this thing out because it's going to grow. The next year is when we really started focusing on the model, and then COVID hit, a few months after. And COVID was, a blessing in disguise in a lot of ways, because I feel like, the bottom would have dropped if we would have gone that entire year growing at the rate we were growing without really having a plan. Yeah. And
the
order, right?
Yeah. Well, and I think the obvious opportunities for evaluation as to how effective we were caused us to step back and look at a model of 12 boys and 4 men. Yeah. So there's a 1-to-3 ratio. And when we kind of landed on that, because the demand was so high, we were then able, after we had the structure in place, to say, here's how we do the program.
Yeah. Now you have the model.
Now we have the model. So this is how we do it. So we can't take more than that. So you kind of determine who those 12 are.
I think, look, I just want to pause for a second, because we're talking about you discovered a need and you responded and you went for it. You didn't hesitate. You went out there and took action. And I just want to say, that is the entrepreneurial journey. Someone sees something like, I could help fill in the gap there. And when you do that, like you don't always start with a plan. You start with an idea, and you go out and you kind of test the idea out.
Fail forward.
Yeah. And then you work it out, because if you have a plan, the plan is going to change in 5 minutes. But you do need to honor the idea that you've got to have order before movement. Like you've got to get enough order. I don't know what the equation is, but it's probably somewhere around, if you get it 85% right, you better get going, right? If you've taken it somewhere past 50%, you better get out there and do it, because if you get it 100% right, you're going to be 100% wrong probably. Yeah. And so you got to get out there, and you had to figure out like, well, look, there's a need for 21, but 21 can't be one group. 21 has to be more like 2 groups. But how do you know that until you get in a room with 21 kids and you're trying to do something effective, and it's like, well, all we're doing is crowd control, or we're just figuring out all the logistics. We got in the logistics business. We're not getting in the heart change business here, So, I just want to pause and reflect on that, because as I think about my own journey, and I think if other people think about theirs, you have good ideas, and first of all, don't kill the idea. Yeah. It's coming
Second
through
thought
you,
is often the one that kills the idea, right?
And then you let it go, and then you got to go. You got to take action, get a result. But that's why one of my values is refine. It's like no matter, look, let me ask you, are you still refining what happens in a day?
Gosh.
Like every single day, right? Yep. And by the way, I don't want to steal, but how many groups and kids? And just give me the stats today, and we can come back and fill in the blanks. But where are you at today?
We got 38 church partners. We'll have roughly 400 boys being mentored on a weekly basis.
And how many schools and school districts does that represent?
We're in 7 counties right now, schools and school districts. That's growing every month, but we'll be in North Carolina in the spring. So
and now you've got something that's repeatable.
Yep.
People can start it faster.
Yep.
The people that are going to go in there and mentor, they're not going to go through everything you guys went to figure out.
Right.
12, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, I think you get it, but go back to where you were, wherever you want to go now. Fill in whatever blanks you feel like need to be.
What you shared, I mean, it was like what's that quote? Movement before order, you get chaos.
Yeah, right.
And I think that's what we found ourselves like. Okay, we narrowed down the need. We took action, and then we began to refine. I love that word. And to now we've got I don't ever like saying a bulletproof system or model, but we got one for the most part right to where now once we meet with a church and a school, we say, here you go. This is what we did. This is how we do it. If you want to pursue this, if you want to adopt this school, then follow the blueprint, in this
Which
booklet.
is an important thing to know that in our model, we don't want to just, hey, we'd love to start a program here at this school. Are there any guys in the area that are interested? Our goal is to establish a mentorship program there, and so we need to have a church in that community that can help be the funnel
I was
provide
going to get to that
mentorship.
point after that. That was the big headache factor that we ran into.
Well, we discovered that is the model we've got to go to.
Yeah.
Then the ownership is on that church.
That was after the COVID year.
So does that put you guys into place, like you have to mentor the mentors? Is that what your role becomes, or how does that work?
I would say yes, in a sense. It's more so of us just us providing some direction, because most of these men are just salt of the earth.
Yeah.
Like they are just, you're just not going to find many better than what we got going into these schools.
Yeah.
But it's to the point where like, a couple of years couple times a year we'll get the mentors together and we'll have sessions where we're walking through the mentors, doing some teaching sessions and sharing some statistics and vision casting and all these things, hearing some stories too. Getting them pumped up about what they're a part of. And but then we also help them troubleshoot too if they're having issues communicating with a school or whatnot. They got this one issue with a kid they just can't seem to figure out, especially with Dad's history with youth. I'm sure there's been one problem you haven't been able to solve, but I don't know it. So like when there's a situation that the mentors themselves hadn't really been able to figure out, that's where our team steps in and helps them troubleshoot. But really because and I want to say something too, there's a lot of great programs out there, FCA, we could probably go down the list of the Boys and Girls Club, just awesome programs that do great work. I will say ours is a little bit unique because we meet during school hours. Yeah. We don't meet before school. We don't meet after school. We meet during school hours. Not many programs do that. Yeah. And not many schools allow that to happen. But we're leadership focused. And what really showed the school districts that we were for real was during COVID, the lockdowns. When the schools began to open back up from the lockdowns, they were doing that e-learning and all that kind of stuff. The schools started opening back up for the kids, but they wouldn't let any kind of volunteers in the schools. They just were not allowing anybody from the outside to come in. If you were not a student or a teacher, you could not come in the school. I don't even know if they let parents in the school for a while.
Just to the office.
Yeah, just to the office area. Yeah. So a few weeks after the school started opening back up, we get a call from Amy Kitts, who was at Barry Shoals Intermediate School, District 5. And she said, this is really the first time I've ever had to, do anything like this. This is all new for us. We've never had to lock the schools down before. Volunteers are still not allowed into the schools, but I am getting these boys every day knocking on my door asking when Fire Pit Ranch is going to start back. Would you, if I could figure out a system that would work for everyone, would you be willing to meet with the kids outside? And I reached out to the mentors. I'm like, I'm good with it. Are y'all good with it? Like, tell us when. So they set up some tables for us in the outside car loading area outside. And we met with the boys every week for the rest of the school year while the schools were still in the lockdown mode. Yeah. And she shared with us no program has ever been that dedicated to our kids before. Nice. If you ever need anything, I'm your first call. Nice. That's what I think separated us from a lot of the other programs is our desire to go above and beyond for these kids because we really do have that kind of relationship with them, and we want to see them grow.
Well, it starts in the 5th grade, but we walk with these boys through their senior year. So those same boys he was with during the COVID year,
we're meeting with them next Tuesday. They're in they're sophomores now.
They're in 10th grade. And I there was a story. We got the mentors together back. It was in February, and I remember this older gentleman from Landrum. I don't know if you remember him saying this, but he's at Landrum First Baptist, and they were in the elementary schools up there, OP Earl. I can't anyway. He said, it was the end of the school year, and they were finishing up. And it was really kind of emotional for the boys. And they said, well, we'll go. And then one of the gentlemen said, well, we're going to see you in the fall. We're going to be going with you to, they're going up to the middle school. And one of the boys said, you mean we get to keep seeing you guys? And I said, yeah, man, we're going to stick with you guys. He said, you mean like all the way through middle school? And he said, all the way. He said, all the way through high school? And it's... And the guy said, yeah. He said, will you go with me to college? And the older guy, and I'll be honest with you, by that point, the older man got emotional.
I bet he did.
He
was making plans.
He said, I'll do whatever you need me to do.
Yeah, I bet he was making plans.
So, it's impacted men.
Yeah.
We're reaching these boys, but, man, the men are just being transformed because they're pouring into these boys.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, again, not to be jaded, but we go back to the beginning of our conversation. We were saying that, the ease of hiding and all of that. But you think about people that have been, there really is a great opportunity for people to become a reservoir. Like you could sit for multiple Sundays in a row and get poured into you. Really, really great stuff. Every week of which could add exponential value to the world.
Yes.
If it gets feet, right? And so most of us just need an opportunity to get our dadgum feet out and do something with what we believe, right? And prove it. Like we have to prove it to ourselves. We what we're doing when we're walking by faith is we're trying to see something that you can't see yet, right? And you're just sort of something stirred inside of you, and spiritually you get it, but physically a lot of people haven't seen it work out. And that's what ruined me, by the way, is like the whole process of transformation and seeing it like actually happen and realize it was possible and not just a pipe dream or an idea, that lives could really be transformed, like generations that have just destroyed each other. All of a sudden, when somebody went through enough of a process of change, then it's a whole new family, right? That jobs get kept, marriages stay intact. You don't think about, well, are you going to get kicked out of this school and have to go to that school, or who's going to end up in prison? You're thinking about building families and businesses and communities, right? So if we haven't seen, look, God's in the redemption business, right? Yes. And in some way we've experienced that personally, but man, it has always meant to go through us, right? It's always meant to go through us. So, one of the things that's happening is people get the opportunity to experience that.
When you hear a school guidance counselor say, I don't know what y'all teach these boys. All I know is, and she referenced this young man, she said, he was in ISS 22 straight days. Yeah. And since he started your program, he has yet to be back. Yeah. She said, I've watched him grow up.
Yeah.
He's been in trouble since the day he set foot on the school.
Yeah.
She said, I don't know what y'all are doing. But in her words, she said, I just pray God lets y'all do it everywhere.
Yeah.
Because these boys need whatever it is y'all are saying. And a lot of it has to do with the men showing up every week. It's that consistency, the power of consistency.
Yeah.
It's not just hey, let's have a big rally and have a feel-good moment and do something for these kids. No, it's every week we're showing up with food and smile, and it's only, 30 minutes? It's not like it's 2 hours.
30 to 45 minutes.
Yeah, but it's just every week.
Okay, so I have two questions. One is, so how there's been classes that have graduated, right?
Our oldest is 10th sophomores.
Okay, so you have yet to have the first graduating class of Fire Pit Ranch. So then that automatically takes me to that second question. Do you foresee a day when somebody graduates from there and becomes a mentor?
Oh, yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would, out of this group that I've got, I would say probably half of them would raise their hand and sign up.
And we would want them to, because they get it.
Yeah.
That's the cycle.
Yeah. I mean, they're the leaders in their schools now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the 7th grade group we have now that we started with 5th grade, the Dr. Urick, she was talking about one of the young men. She was like, he was once in the mix with all these guys. Now he's the leader of those guys and keeps them, this other group that he used to run with, from getting in trouble. Their influence, even at a young age, is being seen by those in authority. And so as they get older, if they're already seeing the value of being influential leaders, they're going to want to continue that in some realm.
Okay, let me pull the thread backwards a little bit. Your dad saw something in you didn't see in yourself.
Yeah.
You told us about the day where you showed up and all the men are there. They probably told you things about you that you didn't see in yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And you're meeting these kids, and everyone else has seen something very limited in them, and you're looking at their potential.
Come on.
And so look what's happening, right?
I mean, when you shine a light on those things, here's the deal. It doesn't matter who you meet in life. Mm-hmm. You can find negative.
Mm-hmm.
You can find stuff. But I've spoken in prisons, in a lot of different prisons.
Mm-hmm. And
one of the things that when I do, I try to focus on is calling out that in them that is good.
Yeah.
Because a lot of them have reached a point where they're just dark.
Yeah.
There's no hope.
Mm-hmm.
And when you take that all the way back into the schools, kids are going through a cycle of beginning to believe all the stuff they're hearing from everybody else.
Yep.
They're a loser, stupid.
Yeah.
You're a troublemaker. What are you doing? Oh my gosh. And we've seen it. We talked with teachers, and you can see even some of them, their demeanor, because they're having to manage so many other kids in the classroom. They're like, oh, he's all the time.
Yeah.
But when you see a spark, one of the things we try to encourage our mentors is to look in that moment to try to find something.
Yeah.
That you can say, whoa, dude, that was good.
Yeah.
They make a comment, and you're like, that's good. Why'd you say that? Tell me why you said that. And they say it, and all of a sudden they were like, wow, I'm not stupid.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, we had a group out at the reps course a couple of weeks ago, and this smaller in stature kid,
Mm-hmm.
it was obvious. I don't want to say the run of the litter. I want us to go that far. But they weren't really listening to him.
Yeah,
and all the alphas were just going at it, and hey, let's do this, the King's Finger. We're doing the King's Finger. And so they were all trying to approach it the wrong way.
Yeah.
And this kid's back here, and he said, well, if we kind of got on each other's shoulders and we started giving this, he was real soft-spoken. Yeah. And I said, hey, you might want to listen.
Yeah, maybe
to
there's
my
an
man
idea
back
over here.
And you could just see his eyes light up like, I believed him, and they all turned and looked at him, and he said it, and I said, that's a pretty good idea.
Yeah.
And from that point forward, they all began to shift back and look, well, even in himself, his stature began to change just a little bit.
That great.
I mean, that's I think deep down, everyone has especially boys, have the desire to be appreciated.
Yeah.
They just want to be seen.
Yeah.
And for a lot of these kids, they've been seen for the wrong reason.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you get them in a room with other kids that are kind of in that same boat, but you got 3-4 men who see the good immediately, and you break that ice in the beginning. Like, look, what's funny is that for most of them, the first time we get them together, they know the other guys in the room.
Yeah.
They're the same troublemaker.
Yeah, right.
Hey, me and you were in ISS yesterday together. So immediately they start thinking, man, I don't know what this is, but it's not good because I know who else is in here.
Yeah.
But when you open up the beginning and talk about how somebody's identified them as a leader, that's why you're there.
Yeah.
So we're going to help you grow. For most of them, number one, in that moment, they feel appreciated. They feel valued, and they feel like, okay, somebody actually cares.
Yeah.
Yep.
Somebody for the first time's in my corner and going to fight for me. And that's how it starts. And that relationship with all those kids, it's different, it's unique. But what's really cool is that in those moments where one of them has a good answer, or they might share a story that resonates with, whatever the topic is, all those other boys are watching too.
Yeah.
They're watching that kid in that moment say something that resonates and that clicks. And so when they leave there, what is said in that room, it doesn't stay there. It carries over into the classroom, into the hallways. And for most of the mentors, I would say not all the groups are like this, but most of them starting out, they don't see much fruit those first couple of years. It takes a while. It takes 2 to 3 years. And some of the mentors get really discouraged. I mean, I was one of those guys, and I was just naturally, I was really good with boys. And so it just, going through this stage wasn't a big deal. I knew if we were consistent, that compounding effect of consistency, I just knew it was going to pay off. But for a lot of these men who've never done anything like this, they're not seeing the payoff.
Yeah. Well, and
those first couple of years.
Look, I mean, I could see, I know from experience how intimidated that can be to be in the room and leading. We used to say, I'm again hearkening back to my wilderness therapy days, but they're going to follow the strongest lead, right? So if you're not the strongest lead in the room, guess who they're going to follow?
Yeah,
right. No, you're right.
100%.
And the intentions of that leader is probably not getting you the results that you want, right? And so, and in the end, it does lead to chaos in some ways, small or big, right? And nobody really wants to live in chaos. Look, you cannot prove to me that people want to live in chaos.
That's right. Yeah.
Right? They don't. People want to know where the boundaries are. They want to know there's order. Sometimes people just want to know you care enough to make them behave themselves, right?
I think a lot of in a summary of what you just said is people want to know where the boundaries are.
Yeah.
And I think chaos emerges in the quest for the boundaries. I think that's where kids are. They're trying to find out where the boundaries are. So until you show me the boundaries, it's going to be chaos.
Yeah.
And it's not that they want it. They're just trying to figure out where the lines are.
Yeah.
And that's why parenting, that's why discipline is so important, consistent discipline, so that kids understand, okay, they actually were serious about this.
Yeah.
They weren't just kidding.
Yeah.
And so, okay, so you can operate in this realm in between these lines. Okay, I get that.
Yeah.
So I can do this here. And that's why as a leader in those circles, we encourage the mentors, the kids are going to be hyped up. They're going to get food, whether it's donuts or biscuits or whatever, Sunny D. So there's going to be like a sugar rush, and you're dealing with all that. Yeah. And so don't try to suppress it all the time.
Yeah.
But make sure you have some boundaries there.
Yeah.
Say, okay, guys, let's dial it in.
Yeah.
And but it's changing our mentors. The men's component of our ministry was something I don't think initially. We were counting on the men to carry out the mentoring, but I think we underestimated just how significant the men's ministry part of what we're doing now and trying to help men, mobilize men, even to the point of what we're doing now.
This thing, I mean, with the mentoring, it's in full roll.
Yep.
I mean, it'd be really interesting for us a year from now,
Mm-hmm.
just to see what's transpired in this 12-month
Yep.
time, right? As we've talked through this, it's clear you've always have a heart for men and doing stuff with men, and you've had plenty of opportunities, men of all ages, right? So this isn't just about mentoring. This involves men, and we talked about how the mentors themselves have had life-changing experiences, and it's been meaningful and probably in some ways transformative for them as well. So talk about what for you and how that's sort of this ministry to men has played out through.
So the call of my life is to the next generation, reaching students, and obviously, the most effective way to impact the lives of a teenager is to impact their home.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I discovered early in ministry was that the family system spoke heavily into what that student was going to become. And when a dad was not present or physically or even emotionally and spiritually, there were huge ramifications. In fact, from a spiritual standpoint, there's greater ramifications from the absent dad than any other factor in the development of a child spiritually.
Yeah.
And so that statistic, when I learned that early in ministry, caused me to be a little bit more focused on trying to call the men to be intentional in fatherhood and the roles that they carry out with their kids. So obviously through all my ministry, working with students, which I absolutely loved and continue to love, I began to gravitate more towards trying to help men understand what it means to be a godly man.
Yeah.
And here again, I shared earlier, and I was blessed to see that in my dad, saw it in my granddad, saw it in my uncle. I've just been blessed with role models that are just godly men that have a strong moral fiber and stand up for what is right, and they speak truth that's unchanging out of God's word, and I always admired that. And when I would say things that were like that, I would always have these men go like, "Man, I just love it when you speak that way. How can I be that way or whatever?" And I'm like, "Man, it's not a secret, but we need to get together and hammer these things out so you can be more confident." It's all about the confidence in what you believe.
Sure.
Because then when you know what you believe and you have your values aligned in the pathway you're traveling, then your confidence speaks to whatever issue you're dealing with because you know what you believe.
Yeah.
And so I began these Bible studies for men, and the Lord really blessed. I mean, we had a large group that began to come to just walk through some of these hot topics together. And so when the time came for me to go to Fire Pit Ranch to come on full time, we changed the title of what we were doing to Fueled by Fire. And we began these monthly gatherings, and we would have speakers that would come in, and we've had a variety of speakers, college coaches and law enforcement officials, political officials, business leaders, people who've gone through trauma and tragedy, talk about how they overcame those things. And over the last couple of years, we have watched God do some just amazing things in the lives of these men. And the irony is, while a lot of them are mentors, there's a lot of them in that come to this Bible study that are not mentors because many of them feel like they can't be.
Yeah.
They're carrying a lot of baggage or broken or whatever, or it could be that just from a time standpoint they can't do it. But so over the last, I would say, couple of years, we have built a group, kind of a following, if you will. And we speak to a lot of men's groups all over the upstate, so it would not be uncommon for our team to be called in to speak at men's ministry events all over the upstate. And we love doing that. We love speaking into those events, whether it's a wild game dinner or a men's conference or on a Sunday morning that's on a men's focused event, that we basically are using our influence through Fire Pit Ranch to call men to be the thermostats for the community, the spiritual thermostats for the community. And I think, one of the things that's been really special is as we've watched this group grow, the last, I would say, 8 or 9 weeks with the hurricane response, we have seen the strength of that network now really exposed in a positive way. In fact, to be honest with you, we've been kind of overwhelmed because of the connections we have with so many churches. There's a trust level that's been established with Fire Pit Ranch. And so when we say, hey, we need this, can you help us with this? And really, you think about our men's ministry events that we've done and are now doing. When I think back to, Caleb calling us, Caleb Phillips, saying, hey, we need to go and do this up at Black Mountain Children's Home, that really started something we didn't know was going to happen.
Sure.
When I'd say you could even turn the clock back when we really saw the support that we had from men came from some of our first work days at the ranch after we bought the property.
Yeah.
We put out a call, set a date, put out a call for help to come and begin to renovate the property right after we purchased it, and we had no idea who was going to show up. And there were 2 work days, one Saturday and then the following Saturday, and both days we had 30 to 40 men, trucks, equipment. The
first day was over 70.
Yeah, first day was
10 businesses.
Yeah, first day was over
showed
70.
Up.
Yeah, but that's when we saw that was a moment where we were like, man, there's a lot more people that have caught this vision than we realize.
That's a good,
Well, okay. So by the way, because we haven't talked about this a ton yet, summarize real quickly, like what is the intention of the property? What's happening on the property? What do you expect to be happening on the property? And
so we've got
how does that fit in with Fire Pit Ranch?
We've got about a 2,500 square foot lodge. It's got a kitchen where we could do, when we host events, we could cook in-house. We've got an area that's probably about 12 to 1,500 square feet-ish where we can do events and stuff for, 70 to 90 men comfortably. That's where we do our Fueled by Fire events. So every month we'll have men's events down there, Fueled by Fire. We have a lot more events than that, but Fueled by Fire is every month, and we needed a place for these men to meet. We built a low ropes course that is strictly for team building and leadership development for kids in the mentoring program, youth groups that want to utilize the ranch, and athletic teams. We've got athletic teams that come from all over the state that will facilitate. They could be there for an hour. They could be there for 8 hours.
And you'll provide the facilitation for them?
Yes, we provide the facilitation and everything. And we've got an 8-acre lake, so we'll use that for when groups want to come in and they want to spend the day with us. We might do a little bit of team building, do a nice meal, take them fishing, have a debrief session. But we wanted a place where these kids could come and just escape the day-to-day, slow down a little bit. And we built an athletic field because we really, I would say, the part of the ministry that's really beginning to grow is more and more of these athletic groups wanting to come in and utilize the ranch. And so we wanted a place for them to be able to host a practice if they wanted to host a practice, do a lot of competitions, challenges, all that kind of stuff. So we've built a facility that caters to a lot of different groups.
Yeah.
And we're using it now 3-4 days out of the week, every single week.
I have a couple questions. First of all, where is it in relation to Spartanburg, Greenville? Where is
right
it?
on the edge of Pauline, South Carolina.
Okay.
Off Highway 56.
Okay. All right. And then just simple, if someone wanted to have a corporate group out there or a bid, they could do that.
Hosted several, a bunch of businesses and corporate groups out there. Yeah.
Okay. And then does someone live on the property full time?
No, nobody lives on the property full time.
And then who is the main person who would do facilitation of the ropes course, and who would do that?
Myself, Dad, or Caleb Phillips.
Okay.
And we've built it to a place where every activity that we do, we can have anybody facilitate the activity. We've built a program where anybody can follow it, but
we
if
can
there's
facilitate
a large,
up to 100 at one time.
100. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we'll have other facilitators we have that will walk with us. If it's a small group, it'll just be us.
Most of them are retired coaches or folks that have done this kind of stuff in the past. But in large part, if it's going to be a group that comes in, it'll be myself, Dad, or Caleb Phillips. And
everybody, it's all kind of during the day. Mostly people aren't staying overnight right on the property.
We don't have, most of it is going to be during the week. We'll do some Saturday events, but most of them is going to be Monday through Friday. And we don't allow anybody to stay overnight unless it's like a Boy Scout group or something like that.
They kind of are facilitating themselves.
Yeah.
It's kind of almost like
but no overnight housing.
It's almost like probably the equivalent of if you're going to like a national or state park, they have a group camping area, so it doesn't have all the amenities. You're not providing shower facilities and all that. So, so if somebody wanted to help you with the development of that property itself,
yep.
Like what if you could just go, man, the wish list thing right now is what, fill in the blank. Like what would be the one thing someone could do to help with that property tomorrow?
To be honest with you, we need a piece of equipment. We need a skid steer on the property.
Yeah.
We would utilize it multiple days a week. That's one of our big needs right now as we close out the end of the year is that somebody would either find it in their heart to donate gently used skid steer or the funds to go purchase one. We have a list of men who have come and volunteered their time with their own machines. Sometimes it's just easier if they could detour from work. If the machine was already there, we needed some work done, they hop in it
and go. And I like how you said that based on my experience. Because there's probably people who have a skid steer that's out there and is sitting in the field for a reason.
Yeah.
Grass
get it off
around it. There's all kinds. Yeah. It's a home to a lot of different creatures.
Yeah.
And they'd love to get it off of their property and onto yours. That's not what you're looking for. Gently used.
Well, it's got a lot of life left.
You got to be functional.
Yep.
Because look, someone has to understand, like, what you don't need is another burden to take on. You need something that's useful. You'll take great care of it. Yeah. But I just want to say that because, experience tells me.
I'll say the other two things. We'd love to have a bridge on the backside of the property that crosses over kind of a creek that feeds into our lake. There was a bridge there years ago, and it would take somebody with some knowledge on
to engineer it.
To put that together, and then kind of our long-term goal, but not like super long-term goal, is a larger structure for larger gatherings that oversees the lake, kind of like a barn dominium type complex that we could also host team building on the inside if weather is not
a little conducive. Bit more of a lodge effect.
That's kind of one of those big things.
Probably best if that could have some kind of kitchen facility in it, I suppose.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So, look, one of the things I wanted to make sure of we talk about, because I think, well, before we do that, let me just ask, because I noticed you got a trip coming up to Wyoming. Talk about that and those trips.
Yeah, so
say something about that.
So throughout the year, I'll take some leadership trips. They're all small groups. I won't take any more than 10. So like we're going to Jackson Hole for snowmobiling in January. Okay. And that's gonna be a lot of fun. And then the evening we'll be doing some debrief and just talking about life.
And is this like the one you and I talked about, where you will drive there, or will you fly it on this?
Yeah,
one?
we'll fly. We'll fly
to this one.
Yeah,
okay.
This one is for flight.
Yeah.
We go back to Jackson Hole in May. That one we mastermind the book The Way to Win by Jeff Little, and we'll fly fish. We'll ATV ride through the Tetons. We'll go into Yellowstone, and every night we're walking through different chapter components of the book.
Flying on that one or driving on that one?
We fly on that one.
Fly on that one.
And then the one in April, that is a group of 6, and it's it's going to fill up as soon as we launch it. It'll fill up pretty quick. We'll go to our first stop as we drive to Ohio State University. And we'll get literally a VIP tour, stuff that nobody else will ever have access to. We have somebody on the inside there that helps us out with that. But we'll go through the stadium and their athletic facilities, football facilities, meet with some of the players and coaches. do a deep dive on why the pursuit of excellence is a critical piece of Ohio State. We talk about that.
You don't say Roll Tide while you're doing that tour.
They know. My buddy there, he knows that, that
you're not wearing a big
but I don't
on
wear
your
my
hat.
Alabama gear. In fact, I tell all the guys that go, I said, I don't care what school you support.
Yeah.
That day we're all friends.
Buckeyes.
We're all friends. And then that later that day we'll drive up to Notre Dame, and we stay on campus at Notre Dame, which is really cool. And the next day we'll tour the stadium, and then we'll meet with the coaching staff and some of the players, go through their football facility, and then and touring the campus is just iconic.
Yeah.
And depending on time, we'll go to a mass there, to attend mass in the cathedral, which is just very special.
Yeah, it's a special place.
Very special place. Yeah. And I just need to say that every stop of the way, and if anybody wants to reach out to TJ Norris or Will Cox or some of these guys who went with us on the last one, they'll tell you we eat really good on the trip. But the places we get to see and the people we interact with, like with meeting with the coaches and players at Notre Dame. I mean, Jack Kaiser's the captain, and we were unpacking their theme for the year. And they're 10-1 right now, and they're in the football playoffs. And these guys are legit. I mean, they've got a real shot to be in the top 4. I don't think they're going to win it, but I think they got a real good shot.
Sure.
But then we'll go from there to down to Indianapolis. And we'll eat at St. Elmo's Steakhouse.
Yep.
And then we'll tour the Indianapolis 500 the next day and have a backstage, experience there. Really, really special. And depending on time, there's a couple of places we stop there in Indianapolis, depending on time frame and what the guys want to do. And then we go from there to Louisville, Kentucky.
Okay.
And we eat at Matt Wynn's Steakhouse, which is inside the Derby.
Yeah.
And that's at night, so we get to watch the sunset. And,
nice.
And then we go back the next day to watch the horses work out. And we have a back pass to go back to where the horses are. And that's really special. We get to go back. You don't get to pet the horses, but you get to be back there with them.
Yeah.
And and at each step along the way, there's some teaching points we walk through.
Yeah.
And we're talking about the self-aware leader, John Maxwell's book, Self-Aware Leader. That's kind of what we unpack on that trip. But that is when we actually drive. And here again, we eat good. Fellowship's great. But the couple of the guys that went without hesitation said it was the most impactful experience of their life.
I can imagine. Yeah.
In fact, on the Wyoming trip last year, one of the guys that went, Danny Holcomb, he's our chairman for Fire Pit Ranch, but he just wanted to go on one of these trips, and he said it was a trip that changed his life, impacted him, just his perspective. So we enjoy doing that. We've got another trip that we weren't able to do this year because of the hurricane, but it's, we go through Clemson and Georgia Tech, Chick-fil-A, go down to the Mercedes plant in Tuscaloosa, then we go to the University of Alabama. And then we come back through Talladega, and they can, do the driving experience there.
Nice. Yeah, wasn't able to do that. When you started 2024, you probably didn't think you'd be spending as much time in North Carolina this year, did you? But, of course, we're talking about if anybody's paying any attention or if they're aware that you guys have been doing some incredible stuff. And I'm sure you have a lot of and great stories about what's happening through Fire Pit Ranch and going on up there. But I'll just say we were kind of talking before we started, and I just said, as soon as I started to grasp the reality of the storm and started to understand at least some scope of the devastation, my immediate thought was, man, people are going to get fired up. They're going to want to help. And then the danger here is that the need is going to last for a long time, but people's excitement or fervor for it is going to go away quickly. And, there's a real thing. People get what's called compassion fatigue. It's like, man, you hear story after story and something happens after a while. It's like, it's not that you don't care. It's just like when you're not able to when you're not doing something with that level of compassion, it'll wear you out. And so you kind of get this survival mechanism where you just kind of stop thinking about it and you have to put it out of sight, out of mind. But the need hasn't gone away. I think the other thing is, we've been talking about shining a light in the darkness, and we could look. You could say, like you said earlier, you could find darkness anywhere, but you guys have been shining a light. So just how did that all unfold for you guys and your work there? And just sort of tell me whatever you think people need to understand. I know, at the time we're filming this, you're getting ready for another trip back up there in 2 days, right?
2 trips. Yeah,
so
Thursday and Friday.
Yeah, so this is ongoing. Those won't be your last trips, but just kind of catch me up on what have you been doing and what's going on.
I'll let Jacob kind of tee it off because it's really.
I'll kind of share how we got started and then let him take it and run with it because he's made some great connections up there. But when the storm hit, at least where we were, we didn't have phone service. We didn't have power, any of those things. And so we really lost most of our communication. And so we were kind of like a lot of other people in the dark with just how bad the storm was. We knew how hard it hit us. I mean, it was legit. And where we are, anytime we lose power, we know something significant has happened. But when we started to get a little bit of cell service, we immediately started, reaching out to everybody on the team. We contacted Caleb Phillips, who lives up in the Travelers Rest area, just checking in on him and just seeing after our immediate needs were taken care of, do you need something, yada, yada, yada. Well, then he began to share with us some of the news that he was getting back from some of his friends up at the Black Mountain Children's Home. And that's where, Caleb was. He worked for a while before, coming to Fire Pit Ranch. And I think he interned there maybe years, several years ago, but really has, strong connection there. And so he decided to, I think this was 4 or 5 days after the storm. So all this is still really fresh. Well, he goes up there with his wife, Jade, and they, they go up there in this truck. I think they take some supplies, and he is sending us videos and pictures as he's up there. And when we're seeing these videos and pictures, it's really just hard to wrap your mind around what you're seeing up there. Yeah. Because at this point in time, we were, obviously praying and really hurting for the people in North Carolina, Eastern Tennessee, and in our area, but we were not thinking about going up there to help. Yeah. It was just, man, I hope they're okay, and, this and that. Well, when Caleb started sending us these pictures, he was just like, and I remember he said, I'm going to be coming back up here either, until I fall over or the wheels come off my truck. And I knew when he said that, I'm like, okay, then it has to be serious. And so when we took the trip up there, I think the following week, it was like 8-9 days after the storm. It wasn't immediate. It was 8 days after the storm. And after we saw everything, we took about 15 to 16 guys up there with us, did a bunch of chainsaw work, helped out the children's home, did a clean out of one of their main rooms there where the children, like the game room and stuff like that. But then we went and did some work at a couple of houses, removing trees off of houses and all kind of stuff. When we were able to really get a full picture of what's going on, we realized what you just said. There's going to be a lot of people that's going to want to help in the beginning, but you fast forward 2, 3, 4 months later, a lot of that help is going to dwindle down. So we need to make sure that we have a plan, because if this is something we're going to commit to, we need to make sure we're consistent in showing up. And one of the most, I think, encouraging things that I've ever witnessed in my life is when we started driving through all these towns that had seeing trains flipped over, semis flipped over. All this destruction, train tracks folded up like a pretzel. And you're looking at the devastation, but then at the same time, you are seeing thousands of men and women from all over the East Coast. Guys from Nebraska, Wyoming, guys that have been making the trek, 500,000 miles away to come and help. nothing made me more proud to be an American than
That's right.
that day, the first day that we were there. And then as we kind of debriefed and we just talked about, everything that we saw, like, man, we did a lot of work in one day, but this is going to take years for these people to, if they choose to try to build back from this, some of these folks, it's going to take years. How do we continue to support them? Mm-hmm. Because we're only so big.
Right.
We only have so many resources. What does that look like? Mm-hmm. And about that time, once word got out that we made one trip, going back for another, more and more people, I mean, I'm telling you, man, dozens at a time, folks from all over the state reaching out saying, hey, next time you go up, we want to jump in and ride alongside you. I've got an excavator. I've got a skid steer. I've got a dump truck. I've got dump trailers. I've got a crew of 8. I've got, Mike Asepko, like I'll bring my whole team,
I've got a tree company.
I've got a tree company, bucket trucks. I mean, cranes, all kind of stuff. And we're just like, man, this is unbelievable. And I'll let Dad share some of the stories, because some of the stuff, man, you can't make up what happened.
Yeah.
And it got to the point now to where we couldn't go up and facilitate all these trips, all these people that were wanting to help. So we started really turning it over to churches. Mm-hmm. And
I think that's what, one of the trips we made, we went to Spruce Pine and the devastation obviously is everywhere. It was interesting. I will say this. I was with a gentleman yesterday who's extremely well-read, well-connected, extremely bright. And I made the comment, I'm going up on Thursday with a crew to help build a fence, and then we're carrying 100 bales of hay up on Friday with 7 trucks. And he said, is it still pretty bad up there? I looked at him and I said, bro, I'm just telling you, it is unrecognizable in most of those areas. They're just trying to survive. He said, really? I said, it's just not on the news anymore.
Yeah.
That cycle's gone. Yeah. And so anyway, when we came back from that trip, the initial trip, the phones began to light up going, hey, when can you go? When can we go? So we began to make trips. We go to Spruce Pine with a huge crew. We got connected with an organization called PCCR, which is based out of Pennsylvania, predominantly Mennonite and Amish. And they, very similar to Samaritan's Purse, they're an international organization, but they really focus on disaster relief and human crisis. And so we worked all day, really fell in love with the crew there at PCCR, and they were very organized. And so as we had people say, hey, we want to come, it may not align up with the days we could go. So we're like, hey, listen, go to these guys. We'll set you up with this crew. And so we began to coordinate trips for crews to go up, and we'd give them FPR hats, and they'd be wearing FPR hats. And 2 tree companies that went up. Took huge crews up there and did work that ordinary folks just could not do. And so we realized then, okay, we're in this because we're seeing men rise up everywhere saying, hey, I want to help, I want to serve. And so one of the big initiatives that we took on was ask the guy, I said, what do y'all need? He said, okay, winter's coming, and cold weather deaths are going to happen.
That was heavy when he said that. I mean, we all had like chills. Like, so what do you need? Yeah. And he said, well, these are these big buddy heaters from Mr. Heater that we need. And I said, well, how much do those things cost? He said, well, about $125, $130 a pop. It's like, so we come back. I'm like, man, let's make a goal, try to get 100, so we can raise money for 100. That's a big ask. Well, to make a long story really short, we began to connect the dots and called a buddy of ours with Edward Jones, and who's a dear friend of ours. And through his help and connections, we were able to go straight to the manufacturer. We worked out a deal. We raised the money to purchase 1,000 heaters, and we got an 18-wheeler out of Ohio that came straight from the manufacturer. And I called up my buddy up there at 10 at PCCR. I said, you got a big crew there at the warehouse? He said, why? I said, I got 1,000 buddy heaters coming your way. It's quiet. He said, so you kidding me, man? I said, oh, man, you said you needed help.
He said, you know, our goal was to service 1,000 homes. I said, well, there's 1,000 buddy heaters coming your way.
Somebody knew, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, here's the story where it gets crazy.
Mm-hmm.
I get there, okay? I pull in.
This is just the heaters.
This is just the heaters.
Right.
I get there, and right when I get there, AmeriGas is pulling in, and unbeknownst to PCCR, they're donating 1,000 propane tanks of the big propane tanks with the connectors for the
heaters.
For the heaters. And so while I'm there on the spot, I watched 7 families who came into the warehouse, walked out with buddy heaters, propane tanks, would go back to their homes. I was up there a week and a half ago, and Ken, who works there with the organization that PCCR left, and now Empowering Hands Charity is kind of carrying out the mission of what PCCR started there. They're overseeing the warehouse and the job assignments up there. And he said, I took 17 of those buddy heaters to Tent City down at Bat Cave. And there were 17 families there still living in tents. And he was just walking me through how the heaters were distributed and just the stories that have emerged.
That's a week and a half ago, and they're still in
That
tents.
was working out, yeah. And I drove by one of the tent cities in Avery County.
Yeah.
I mean, I heard a guy tell me, he says, man, there's guys living at tents up there. I'm like,
How many tents would you say were the one you drove by?
The one I drove by, there was probably 9 or 10 families.
Yeah.
Bat Cave was 17. I have no idea where the migrant camp is, but there's a migrant camp where there's a bunch. And so, you know, I had a guy say, you know, well, they have housing options. You know, their people are opening up their homes over in, you know. I said, this is their land.
Yeah.
This is their roots.
This is their roots. This is their family. This is all they know. And I said, and I get it. I get that they could go there and have run. Well, this is their home. And you know, I was telling Jacob, I was coming back through Avery County, and I looked out, and there's this old man across the river, and there's this tent, and there's 2 telephone poles, and that's how he gets to the main road.
Across. Yeah.
And he was out there with a chainsaw trying to clear a pathway.
I'm gonna share a story and let you. It all ties in together with the heaters and everything. But about a week or so later, I was talking with a guy who owns Asheville Highway Rental in Spartanburg.
Oh, wow.
And he called me, and he knew about everything that FPR was doing up in North Carolina, and he asked if there was a need for generators. And I said, yeah. And he said, well, how many do you think, you could take? And I was like, well, are you giving them to us, or do we need to buy them? Yeah. He said, well, I can't give them to you, but I can do it at a heavy discount. And I said, well, let me see if I could figure out some numbers about roughly how many do you have? And he had about 120 generators, and about 70 or so were like the perfect size inverter, just great for the homes. And so after I talked with him,
shortly after that phone call, I call him.
Yeah, he calls me, and I'll let you pick it up because I had no idea.
You didn't know he had these conversations.
I had no idea. Right. So I'm in Mitchell County right now. I'm at the courthouse in Mitchell County overlooking Bakersville.
This all happens within an hour.
I'm standing on the phone because I had just left the warehouse and talking with Tim, and we had just delivered the heaters. I said, so what else you need? He said, we have so many places that don't have power. I said, well, how many, what are we talking about? He said, we need generators, man. We need right now, we know of 58 specific places. And I said, okay, well, we'll find 58 generators. God's got them somewhere. And so, I'm calling Jacob, and I said, hey, baby. I call all my boys baby. Yeah. I said, baby, I said, so we got to find 58 generators. He said, really? He said, Daddy, I just got off the phone with Warren at Asheville Highway Rental. They got 70 generators right now. And I said, well, somebody donated Tim the money to buy them. They don't have to donate them. Yeah. Long story short, by that afternoon, the money was wired. The next day, Jamie Smith with Elite Towing pulls into Asheville Highway Rental, loads those 58 generators on his truck, and they're sitting in the warehouse less than 24 hours later, and they're able to distribute those out that night.
Within a week.
Nice.
I mean, they're in those families' homes.
And there were so many stories like that. I mean, when we were in the headquarters there, for PCCR headquarters, there was a NICU baby that was born the night of the hurricane. And obviously, you know, crisis. You know, this child's not going to make it.
Sure.
Okay. There were so they established, PCCR was on their way down to set up headquarters because they knew that this was going to be a need. So they set up headquarters in this office area, and had put out like, hey, if you can help, volunteer, serve in crisis response, come here. So they're on the phone with the family that has a NICU baby, and they're trying to troubleshoot here. There's 3 ladies that walk in the door that drive. I think they're from Georgia. And they were all 3 labor and delivery nurses. One of them was a NICU specialist. And I looked at Tim, I said, dude, there's no way that's true.
Yeah.
He said, if I hadn't been the guy on the phone, I wouldn't have believed it. He said, I'm sitting there looking, and he's like, I can help you. He said, yeah, we're labor and delivery nurses. Do y'all need any help? Any story after story after story that in the midst of such devastation and heartache, God is showing up in ways that just can't describe. I mean, we were up there 2 weeks ago helping this farmer build his fence. You know, I could take too much time, really. I mean, I have story after story after story of what we've seen happen. You know, cattle farmer, 4th generation cattle farmer. He's also a pastor, and a lot of the pastors up there are bivocational, and just totally destroyed the fence line. I mean, they lost 41 million trees in western North Carolina alone. So his property was devastated. And they're like, well, we're going to have to sell our cows. And it just crushed them. They'd made their decision to sell, and he'd mentioned that to a church member who had mentioned it to a guy with PCCR who mentioned it to us, saying this guy's going to lose his farm if we don't build fence. I said, well, what does he need? And he said, well, he needs 2 miles of fencing. He needs 1,200 T-posts. He needs 150 of these wooden posts. He needs this. And I'm like, okay. So we started
running numbers.
We started running the numbers, how much we need. Within 2 hours, we had the money, had people who donated the money. We called Coleman Farm Supply. They had the supplies sitting on the yard. That following Saturday, all those supplies, we had them trucked up.
Camo Sullivan, Jamie Smith.
Trucked him up to his property. They're pulling into his farm, and he has no idea. And this guy just breaks.
Oh, man.
And then when we pull up the next Friday to install, and all of our trucks are rolling in, there's 20 of us. We're all rolling in these trucks and four-wheelers and UTVs on trailers, and he's just shaking his head. And, we're going up Thursday to help finish the fence. Friday, we're carrying 100 bales of hay up there. One of the things that happens every time a group goes up there, we're carriers of hope.
Yeah.
And that's what we keep trying to tell these men that are going up there, that yes, what we're doing matters. It is making a difference.
Yeah.
But even greater than the task is the message.
Yeah.
You're not forgotten. We know you're here. I mean, last Thursday, I'm standing on South Toe River, the banks of South Toe River, with a pastor whose church is rubble. Okay. Over 100 years old, church. Rubble. And I said, Pastor, let me get a video of you, and we'll get the word out. I mean, I'm telling you, people want to pray. They want to know how to give and support what's happening here, because the churches have become the lighthouse in the community. I mentioned this to you earlier. We get questions all the time. What is the government? What's the government doing? And I said, I'll say this. Nobody is equipped to respond to what we're going through. Nobody. And we've seen government response, military response. They're doing all that they can do. But I'm going to tell you what's really showing up is the American people.
Yeah. Neighbors helping neighbors.
Yeah, neighbors helping neighbors. And I'm standing there with that pastor, and there's 2 guys on these heavy machines. And Pastor Whitson said, that guy's from Montana, that guy's from Idaho. I said, what? So I said, so we talked for a little while, and he had to leave. These guys get off their machines. They walk over and say, can I interview you guys real quick on video? Yeah. I didn't know what I was getting myself into, but I said, why? why'd you come from Montana? And he said, all I know is, he said, it was the week after the hurricane and all of the political stuff that was going on in the news. He said, this world is nuts. This world is nuts. And he said, everything's crazy. He said, the only thing that made sense to me was to get my truck, get my trailer with my 2 machines, drive across the country and help these people. And I said, well, how long are you here for? He said, I'll leave end of March. I said, you making any money? He said, no pay. He said, this is what I'm supposed to do. He said, this is what the Lord would want me to do. This is how neighbors help neighbors.
Yeah.
No matter what you said. And that's every community. There's stories duplicated like that everywhere. And it's a beautiful picture, man. It really is.
Okay, so now let's answer 2 questions as we wrap up here. What is the biggest need right now? So I'm sure there's heaters and generators, plenty that could be needed and used. What's the next thing that's like that? What's the biggest immediate need that people could help with?
So I would say if you want to go to a website, Empowering Hands Charity, they have like a jobs list, a projects list.
That's the place.
And they're servicing Mitchell, Avery, and Yancey counties. And what we need is, like, let's say there's a construction company that could give 2 days of manpower. Hey, we're going to send our crews in to do this and to build, something, whether it's rebuild their basement, rebuild, put in drywall, build their garage back, put in plumbing. I mean, there's a variety of different things, and that was kind of just spitballing a little bit, but like we have 18 barns to build. We have 18 farmers who need to replace their barns. Well, the winter's coming, and we've already got 18 sets of trusses that have been donated. We've got to get metal. So all that being said, Empowering Hands Charity is coordinating all of these projects.
People could go see what the needs are, whether it's going to do for work or for helping provide materials.
Yeah, and they can give financially to them to buy the supplies. Yeah, because that's kind of where we're kind of targeting, and what we're doing is we're trying to encourage churches to go there, or we can connect them. I've connected 2 churches with 2 churches up there that need physical work, and they basically have adopted those churches. And we're glad to help in that. We can still connect as well, but David and Ken and Josh and those guys with Empowering Hands, they're boots on the ground every day. We're up there at least once a week, but they're there every day.
And they've summarized the needs right there.
Very organized. It's very, very, their website's top notch. These guys are above board. There's no like money being made. If you give money, it's going from the materials. Right. I mean,
we kind of like if people still want to donate supplies, we're still taking supplies.
Yep.
So the ones that are local here, if they've got a truckload of supplies they want to donate, then we're still taking those up every single week.
Food and heat sources.
A lot of those supplies have already gone down.
Food and heat sources.
Food and heat sources.
Well, that's simple.
Yeah. Food, dry goods. We've got a school we've kind of adopted, we did, Greenlee Elementary in Spruce Pine, and we're donating books and boxes of cereal. And when we talked to the principal about that, she wanted books. I said, well, what if we gave each child a book and then a box of their favorite cereal? She was like, oh my gosh. I said, comfort food, man. You're gonna, if you want to get them to read,
that's right.
If you'll read, you get a box of cereal. And but little things like that will go a long way up there, and we can help you get to the right spot to distribute.
Okay. So what have we left unsaid as far as that goes? What is there any other message that you want people to know that we haven't said already?
I will say this, that if I gave you 3 places, if you wanted to go see for yourself, okay, drive to Swannanoa, okay, and you could really go to Swannanoa and then turn around and go back home, because once you see it, you're like, okay, really? That is multiplied throughout that entire region in small pockets where towns have just been absolutely devastated. Downtown Bakersville, everything's gutted out. Burnsville, churches, homes, and so it is a long-term process. And so if you were saying, gosh, I can't get up there in the next 2 weeks. Hey, if you can set aside a time in February, spring break.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be work that's going to be going on all through next summer.
Yeah.
Appalachian Service Project is already gearing up for all of their projects to go into that region next summer, every week, building homes. So, but I encourage them to put boots on the ground. Just drive up there. You can be up and back in a half a day from this area. And that's when you realize, okay, this is not short term.
Yeah.
They need heavy equipment. They need financial sources, but they need people coming saying, hey, we're here. What can we do to help? Last thing, I just got to say this, and I can hear you. I can talk all day. We're at that house in Black Mountain, and we're in the backyard. There's like 5 billion trees we're trying to cut up. That lady comes to the fence and just watching us, and we're working because the sun's going down, and we know we've got to get out because there's no power anywhere. Okay, so we're working as quickly as we can to get the backyard cleaned up for this family of 5 kids, 4 or 5 kids. And as I'm going by on one of the trips by, I notice she's crying. Mm-hmm. So I go over, and I'm like, hey, you okay? She said, you guys are the first people that we have seen that are not with like a power company or something. She said, what are y'all doing? How much do y'all charge? I said, no, we're here. We're just helping out. We're just here to serve. And she said, well, what's going on in the world right now? We have no power, no TV, no. She started going through the list of what they don't have. And I think for us, when those of us who begin to gather around and heard the story, we're going, well, so that was 8 days after, okay? And this is what I wanted to end with. We ended up praying with her, and her husband came over, and it was just the sweetest time. But there are families that will not get power, period.
Hundreds, if not thousands.
Yes, there's the substations are gone. It's meaning they can't, oh yeah, we'll get substation up back and running and we'll get these power lines up. They got to put a new substation on the other side of the mountain, which takes years to build. And they got to run a new power transmission lines to get to the substation to send it up the mountain. And some of these people are just finding out, they thought they were going to get power in November and December. Mm-hmm. They said, well, we may have it by May. It could be next fall. It's hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of people that's what they're faced right now. And they're in beautiful homes up in the mountains. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of our people that they're having lifestyle changes right now and reevaluating and thinking through what do we do now? Yeah. Because financial resources, they've done all they can do. Mm-hmm. So just as we enjoy life getting back to normal here, they're a long way from that.
Well, we can always pray.
That's right.
And we've got a way, so we'll make sure as this goes out, people have connections to help and keep helping. Yeah. And, man, this was awesome.
Thank you.
Appreciate
it's
you,
heavy
brother.
stuff, but it's good stuff. And thank you so much for what you do. I think it's an understatement, But thank you for taking the time out of that to come here and talk about this. And, what we'll be faithful in is just trying to use this to get the word out and let more people know.
Thank you, brother.
Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yep.